Hello and welcome to The Green Stream, a podcast brought to you by Sustainable Business Network Detroit, a network of partnerships between Southeast Michigan stakeholders, innovators, and changemakers. Each partner is on a mission to advance and amplify sustainable business practices, and we're here to learn from, share, and help activate a sustainable way forward for Greater Detroit. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a review and join the conversation on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And head over to our website, sbn-detroit.org. Now, let's listen in to our conversation with today's sustainability leaders.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us on the Green Stream today. I'm Terry Barclay, President and CEO of Inforum and Chair of the Sustainable Business Network of Detroit. And I am over the moon that joining us today is Jermaine Ruffin, who's Senior Vice President of Neighborhoods at Invest Detroit. And Jermaine, you've just got this amazing background. So I just want to say welcome, and I hope you're going to tell us a little bit about tell us about your career and how you got to where you are now.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, Terry, I just want to thank you for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today. I'll give you a little bit about my background. I moved here from Ohio to go to Michigan State University, and like a lot of my my fellow friends and things, we were looking for work that we were passionate about. And after graduating. Before I graduated from Michigan State, I found that opportunity. I thought it was in politics. And so I spent a little bit of my college career and early professional career working in and for, different senators and presidential campaigns and, really digging myself into the political landscape of the state of Michigan and nationally as much as I could, just to get an understanding of what it took to make change. Wherever I lied, or wherever I
ended up,
wherever I laid my head, put it that way, wherever city or state or that I was in, that I would be able to plug in and really understand how policy is made and figure out exactly how I could make a contribution to my neighborhood or the city that I lived in. And so after that career in politics, I had the opportunity to travel to Florida, and I was there during the John Kerry Edwards campaign, and I went door to door, knocking doors in some of the most impoverished cities in the state of Florida, and it really gave me a bird's eye view of what the work really needed to be for me. And that work needed to be directly addressing issues and challenges that neighborhoods face, much like what I grew up in. And so taking that view, I came back to Michigan and I ended up working for Governor Granholm for an initiative called the Cities of Promise program. And that initiative, I worked with the 8 most impoverished cities in the state of Michigan. And so I got a chance to see, what challenges and struggles that a lot of municipalities dealt with and try to identify solutions to those challenges. And the great thing about working for that administration was, this program really aligned all of the state departments and said, hey, how can we cut the red tape? How can we be of better service to our communities across Michigan? And that really laid the groundwork for me to get interested in urban planning, because before then I had no idea what that field was. But being on the ground in these cities, I realized that all of these major systems contributed to the day-to-day quality of life that residents saw. And I needed to be in that space. And so long story short, I went back to MISTA. I ended up getting a graduate degree from Taubman College at the University of Michigan in urban and regional planning with a specialty focus on community and economic development. And the work that I've been engaged in for the last several years has been at the neighborhood level of how do we shift and change major systems to improve the quality of life for Detroit residents.
Wow. We actually have followed each other a little bit. It's interesting. My undergraduate degree's in urban studies, and I too, the most recent move I made was from Ohio to here, in my case, to go to grad school at University of Michigan, and, ended up staying and making a life and a career in Michigan, which I think is, you know, such a great place
Oh, it
and
is. It is.
on so many fronts, but certainly not without its challenges. And um, I am just fascinated with your work in the neighborhoods. We hear so much talk about the neighborhoods, and sometimes in the past, I have found myself wondering, what are we doing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
To actually make change there. So I'm hoping you can share a little bit about the work with the Detroit Strategic Neighborhood Fund and that whole initiative. Can you tell us what that's about?
Sure, sure. The Detroit Strategic Neighborhood Fund is an initiative that started several years ago in partnership with Mayor Duggan's first administration. After coming out of the bankruptcy, there was, folks could look at it as that was definitely a tragic time in the city, something that residents and stakeholders here went through an experience, and coming out of that, there was opportunity to, decide what the city would look like over the next decade to 20 to 30 to 40 years, having, essentially some of the financial, barriers that had existed for a long time to be removed. And so coming out of that, Invest Detroit looked at a couple of different options. And, when it comes to community revitalization strategies, typically folks are focused on like what we've seen in Detroit, which is, how do you create this commercial and business hub in the downtown area and make those investments? And to an extent, that is a strategy that's been proven, right? So you want to attract businesses to the downtown core area and bring jobs and resources to those spaces. Invest Detroit saw the opportunity, while that was going on, to look at the neighborhoods and say, what are we doing to address the long-term viability of the neighborhoods of Detroit? And really, quite frankly, I think the residents, had raised that through the bankruptcy, coming out of the bankruptcy. What about us? What about our neighborhoods? What about, we don't have street lights. We didn't have, response times from police and all of those things that we deserve. And so folks, kind of rallied and said, what about us? And so I think the Strategic Neighborhood Fund started off as an effort to try to address some of those issues that came up. And so SNF1 was birthed, and that is a public-private partnership between the city of Detroit, between Invest Detroit, and also with local foundations and corporate sponsors who put money into a fund that allow for us to engage residents with a planning process. Because first and foremost, we have to understand what are those needs, because they're unique to every neighborhood. And so SNF1 and then subsequently SNF2 were vehicles to raise these philanthropic dollars, leverage it with state and city funding going into these spaces, and as well with Invest Detroit as somewhat as the fiduciary to help bring these deals, because we're a CDFI, a community development finance institution. And so our work, we're much like a bank, but we're mission driven. So this type of work in the neighborhoods that requires a little more subsidy, that requires, technical assistance to be brought in to help out small business owners and small developers who are looking to be a part of the revitalization of the city. We help fund and empower those folks with our programming and our technical assistance on a day-to-day basis. And so we in SNF2, as we move forward and made those investments, we made them in 5 strategic buckets. Those 5 buckets consisted of, we invested in parks. So in each of the neighborhoods, there was a large park investment or a greenway that we supported, putting in new. The second phase was streetscape improvements and infrastructure improvements along the commercial corridors and within the neighborhoods. We focused on commercial and retail investment. So by that, I mean, there are a lot of entrepreneurs who are operating or were operating businesses out of their homes, or out of some of the startup organizations that are around the city, and those who had this vision that they wanted to be a part of the future of Detroit. And what better place to do that than in your neighborhood, right on a commercial corridor, and get the support of your neighbors and friends, right? And so we work with those folks to bring those ideas to fruition. And then we focused on, some real core and foundational things that neighborhood revitalization requires, which is affordable housing. We partner with the city and some of their programming to make sure that we brought both affordable housing units to the neighborhoods that we're investing in, and then also market rate opportunity as well where it existed. But our goal was to really focus on making all of those investments with the focus on keeping residents who are in the neighborhood. So this from an anti-displacement perspective, but also from a perspective of what is the long-term resiliency and sustainability of these neighborhoods, right? I think, it's important that those folks who have seen the historic up and down of their neighborhoods continue to be a part of the fabric of investment there, but continue to be able to be the ones who tell the story and be ambassadors for the change that they saw that they've seen in their neighborhood. And so this SNF work allows for us to do all of those things from an investment perspective, but stick to the core of we're mission driven. We want Detroiters to be positively impacted, and we want a resilient neighborhood for Detroiters everywhere.
That is just incredible work, important work. How many different neighborhoods have you been able to work with through both sets of investment?
Sure. We've really been focused on 10 different neighborhoods. We say an 11th, and that 11th neighborhood is really, when we look at Northwest Grand River, we're talking about the Grandmont Rosedale neighborhood along with the Old Redford neighborhood. And so, the characteristics and uniqueness of both of those neighborhoods, we tend to say, oh, it's Grand River Northwest, but it's really those two neighborhoods. And so those are the 10 and 11 that we're really focused in. And like I said, those strategies and those buckets of investment have been taking place in all of those respective neighborhoods, and they're at different levels. But our goal is to continue to be a partner until all of those neighborhoods reach what we call resiliency, which means that the investment in those neighborhoods no longer requires the subsidy that Invest Detroit provides, but that we can utilize our regular products in those areas and support some of the initiatives after we've made all of these investments to support residents to get to that level of where that subsidized investment is no longer needed. So we're a long-term partner in this stuff in all of those neighborhoods.
That's just a huge goal, and it's an important goal. Wow. I just have to say, wow. That's really great.
It's a lot. It's a lot on the data. When I say it out loud like that, it's like, wow, the pressure that can kind of come with that. I mean, right? Like you're setting public expectation for, partnership. And, that's something that we take very seriously here. Our reputational stake is on the line when it comes to saying, hey, we're going to be here and be a partner with you. We don't want to half step on that or shortchange, what residents need. And they need that type of investment and support for folks to be able to thrive.
Jermaine, I'm on a couple of nonprofit boards that are working in the sustainability area. One of them is the Nature Conservancy, and they have done some green infrastructure projects, green stormwater infrastructure projects. What are you seeing around green infrastructure in the neighborhoods? I mean, look at the flooding, look at the, some of the just challenges that neighborhoods in particular have had.
Oh yeah, it's definitely been a challenge, and it will continue to be a challenge in Detroit for a little while to come. But I think we're moving in the direction of how do we solve for these issues long term. Yeah. And I can tell you that along our commercial corridors, we are very conscientious when it comes to the streetscape and streetscape improvements about what type of impacts are we making, both from a street calming type of perspective, encouraging wider sidewalks so you can have pedestrians and folks walking around, hopefully cutting down on all of that, the car usage and things like that. But then also when we talk about our parks and green space, it's really important to have that in neighborhoods to make sure that you're providing those types of quality of life items, because it's or amenities, I should say, because those are the things that go long term towards addressing climate change. It's a small way, but it's definitely one of those things that we have to address in our programming. I think the piece about the flooding is really, it's a real challenge, and I think in partnership with the city and residents that hopefully folks are getting to the space where we can understand that this should be a priority for all of us, whether you live in the neighborhood that has been flooding or not. This is a priority for all of us, because bottom line, our tax dollars should be going to resolve these issues long term, or we're going to end up ultimately paying a financial price and climate price here in the city of Detroit. So, we're very supportive and working with different organizations, and quite frankly, our foundation partners, many of them have climate goals and environmental goals that align with our work, right? And so they want to know the same questions that you're asking, like how are we focusing on that? Are we making that a priority part of our community planning process, which we are? Are we making that a priority part of the infrastructure improvements that we're making and the green space improvements that we're making? And we are. And so we have a long way to go, and we're always open for innovation and new ideas that we can utilize in our programming and the resources that we offer to businesses and residents across the city.
Well, I just have to say that certainly one of the very visible impacts that you've had, the green spaces and the parks, it's just, I think it's magical what's happening. I mean, it's really quite extraordinary. And it's really wonderful when you get a chance to hear families talk about the importance of those spaces, to their family. Great work.
Thank you for that. And I just, just quickly, I just want to say, one phase of addressing environmental issues that I kind of glaze over that the parks also provide is, like, we take a park like Fitzgerald in the Fitzgerald neighborhood, the Ella Fitzgerald Park, which, previously there were dilapidated homes there, and vacant lots. And so to be able to take land that had structures on it and clean that land up and put it in use for neighborhood activities, for youth activities, senior activities. Whenever I go over there, I just kind of smile ear to ear, because, I know all the work that it took to get there. And, we had great partners at the city of Detroit who, had that vision and worked with us to make it become a reality.
Yes, I know some of those people who did that work with the city, and I know it's a high point in their careers too, that they were able to contribute to that. So that's really fabulous.
Absolutely.
So you've been talking a little bit about this, but how does Invest Detroit consider the stimulation of equity and the creation of wealth for Detroiters? How do you view that whole thing of creating that sustainability in that way?
Yeah, sure. I think initially with SNF 1 and going into SNF 2, that question of how do we address equity, wasn't at the forefront of what we do. It was really a question of what can we do to just spark the economy, right? What can we do to just spark neighborhood investment? But what we realized quickly through time is that in order for this work to be sustainable and engaging neighborhood residents, they were very vocal about, well, what about us and how can we be a part of this? And I think when we're talking about a city that's over 80% African-American, and the history that exists in these neighborhoods, you can't go into them without acknowledging, redlining that happened, without acknowledging the consistent and persistent disinvestment that took place in these neighborhoods, and some of the challenges of foreclosure and demolition and all of these things, which can create a traumatic environment, right, for a lot of residents in the city. So I think the city of Detroit's planning department, in particular during this period of time, and our partnership with them really dug deep into this community planning process to better understand what those challenges were from a historical perspective, but then also identify those immediate kind of needs and desires that folks have and get those addressed as quickly as possible, because it's hard to focus on your future when your present is so challenged, right? And so I think being able to be in a position to address some of those present challenges also created a level of trust for us that when we say we're planning and we want you to be a part of this moving forward in the future, that residents saw that through action, not just through word. And so that's the foundation of it. The second piece is being intentional. I think that we've been really intentional, especially under SNF2, with working with the Equitable Development Initiative that the Capital Impact Program runs, working with Building Community Value, the program that Chase Cantrell runs, where they have been training up and identifying developers and contractors and business owners and folks who really want to be active in the built environment space. And so for us, when you have Black and brown residents who have seen overwhelmingly the disinvestment and the challenges in their neighborhood now begin to be a part of that investment towards the future, that lays that foundation for generational wealth and resiliency and sustainability that whether I'm still active in this role or Invest Detroit is still active in this role, that positive impact continues. And that's what's important here. It's important that the residents are able, no matter where we are and where we are investing in a city, that folks get that ultimate benefit and be able to not only have it for their quality of life, but to be able to pass it forward to future generations.
Mm-hmm. You know, that's kind of probably a good segue to something that I'm curious about and want to ask you, which is, you've been talking about this all along, but what is the particular inspiration for you personally? I mean, to do this work, you have lots of choices, right? About what you could do and where you could take your talent.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I really feel as if, my lived experience, like I said, I moved up here from Ohio. My family, I grew up in a single parent household, the oldest of 4 boys. And, we lived in a very, rough neighborhood, so to speak, and growing up in that experience. And then my formative years, working in politics and working with impoverished communities, it really set my compass towards equity and justice and giving back with my talents. I know I could be just about anywhere, or at least I've been told that. But there's no place that I'd rather be than the city of Detroit, mostly for the reason that I get to be able to live my personal mission every day. And there is work to do. And I've seen a number of, things progress over the years since I've worked with wonderful people and the residents of the city of Detroit. And I really believe that Detroit has the ability to be one of the greatest cities on earth. If we keep moving in a positive way and we center ourselves with ensuring that our community has that equity and justice and generational wealth building opportunities, like all the great cities in the world do. And so I think we're moving in that way. And I continue to be excited about the work because I have great partners and friends who are operating out in this space, to work with the city of Detroit and their planning department and their housing department. And then to be able to go out in neighborhoods and work with block clubs and, community groups and all of those things. If you can't get energized interacting with people and hearing that experience and seeing a positive impact firsthand, I don't know what you can do. So for me, that kind of work, feeds my spirit. And that's what I enjoy the most out of what we do.
So I probably should have asked this question before that question.
Sure. It's all good.
But I'm also curious about, you've had a chance to well, you see how things work, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You see what the process is. Um, and I'm really curious about what you see the biggest challenges being.
Mm. I think now, there were some big challenges coming into this work, right? I mean, I know from the mayor's first administration and SNF, it was like, we want to get the lights on in the city.
Yeah.
We
I
want to,
remember that. I
yeah,
remember.
so when you start there, now I can look back and I'm like, well, wow, all of those things have happened, all of those investments have taken place. Those types of progress, that type of progress has been consistent and persistent over the last few years. And I think moving forward now is actually, how do we begin to plan for the future of Detroit collectively, like 2050? Or 2075, right? I think that future vision of the city, how do we, involve, smart tech into what we're doing? How do we involve, creating spaces where, maybe, we go without vehicles, to encourage movement in the cities? And what can we do to further positively impact the safety space and how folks feel in neighborhoods and when they're walking these commercial corridors? I think those are some of the challenges that I see in the future, that we are closely getting into the position to be able to address. I just don't think that we're there yet, because we need that collective citywide conversation to be able to understand and plan appropriately for each of the spaces in the city of Detroit. As you know, there are so many unique neighborhoods here, and we don't want to leave any of them behind. We want all of them to have a future moving forward, but it should be up to them what that future looks like, and how quickly and appropriately some of that new technology and those opportunities for investment take place in their neighborhood.
Well said, Jermaine. I love the way that you're putting the residents front and center. And you're absolutely right. When I have out of town visitors and I take them around the city, we do have such a wealth of unique neighborhoods. So it's not a one size fits all process. And that makes it more complicated, but more interesting, right? and
Right.
and probably sets the stage for more innovation, because you're solving from a lot of different angles for the future. I really hope. What do you think is going to be key? Because you said something earlier that I think is so true. You've got to deal with today before you even have the space to think about tomorrow. What do you think is going to help us with that? Why I can tell you're optimistic about our ability to do that, and each of our neighborhoods to do that. So there must be something that you're seeing that makes you feel that that's possible.
It's actually, my perspective of being optimistic is mostly from a reflection of Detroiters. If I can be honest, I remember when I first started working with the city of Detroit in any type of capacity back in 2005, 2006, and then going through, the recession and the downturn in the housing market in 2008, 2000. I mean, so I had an opportunity to see, Detroit when it was going through those challenges. And the one thing that always stuck out with me or stuck with me and my spirit is the resiliency of neighborhoods and folks to find a way to get the services that they needed in their neighborhood with their neighbors. So when the street lights were out, there were folks who might put floodlights out or, plug in and put, do whatever was necessary to be able to ensure that their neighborhood was safe. And they did that on their own, right? And I think a lot of, my optimism about the city of Detroit is that you have a generation of folks who have lived through some traumatic experiences, but time and time again have come back or found a way to kind of fight through and navigate those things for the betterment of their neighbor and themselves. And so for me, if we're now talking about, Now we're bringing resources to those efforts, and we are beginning to listen to those residents in a way where, we're not coming in and saying, we have expertise, but we're not the experts of the neighborhoods. That's what I like to say. It's like, I don't live in your neighborhood 24/7. You do. So I have these tools and I have these resources. How can I help you be, achieve the future that you want to see? And I think that's the part where that optimism gets kind of hyped up for me. Those are the types of conversations that I'm having. And when I'm seeing people opening businesses, or I'm seeing folks make improvements to their properties or to their neighborhood, or coming together for a block club event and those types of things, it's like, you know what? Detroiters are going to make a way where there's no way every single time. And so for me, if I can just be there and catch a little bit of that wave and support what they're doing, then I'm doing my job, and we'll have a brighter future for it.
Well, Jermaine, I don't know how you top that. So really, because I think you're spot on. Anyway.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Jermaine Ruffin, thank you so much for joining us today on the Green Stream, and thank you for the incredible work that you're doing in the community. It's really a wonderful opportunity to have learned more about that. So thank you.
Terry, again, thank you for having me on, and thank you for bringing visibility to all this great work in the ecosystem that's happening here in Detroit. Thank you for what you do.
Thanks. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in to the Sustainable Business Network Detroit, the Green Stream podcast. Remember to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure to follow us on SBN-Detroit.org and stay tuned for more conversations on sustainability from inside and around the city.